It's 2024 and a new year means a new workspace, at least for me. And I've been using this space now for a number of years, and the tasks that I perform at this desk have changed. The tools and things on top of my desk continue to increase, and I just kind of felt like the walls were closing in on me, and the clutter above and below the desk was also making it really difficult to clean. And considering that I spend an unhealthy amount of time at this desk, I figured it was worth the investment of time and money to rework my workstation to improve my productivity, increase my comfort, and just make the space more enjoyable to work within. And if you guys have watched my other videos, you'll know that I'm really into 3D printing, so I'm going to use that for several of my workspace design solutions, and I'll put links to everything that I use in the video description down below, including the links to the design files for those 3D printable parts. So let's get started with the goals for this overall workspace change.
The first goal is rather simple, and it's just to remove the clutter from the top of my desk. And as you guys can see in my desk's current form, I had made an attempt a few years ago to get things organized with these 3D printed desk organizers, but a lot of these tools, gadgets, and things that are on my desk I'm not frequently using anymore. I have a separate workbench, and this space here now is mainly used for video editing and 3D modeling. And even this gaming setup here on the right hand side is just taking up way too much space, so it's time for it to go. The second goal that I have here is to brighten up, warm up, and just introduce some color to my workspace. While doing my YouTube research to see what other creators are doing, I found that a lot of people right now are going with the dark colors, like painting their walls black along with walnut wood finishes, and that's just way too dark for me. I don't get any natural light in this workspace, and I don't want to feel like I'm working in a cave, so I'm going to go in the other direction and keep things bright. The third goal that I have here is to stick to the budget. I put aside $1,000 for this build, and I'm in Canada, so that's 1,000 Canadian dollars. I'm a generally frugal person, and most of what I already have in this workspace has been things that I've gotten for free over the years, or purchased used, or just inexpensive stuff from IKEA. The next goal that I have here is for the space to remain functional. I know some of the extremely minimalist desk setups that I've seen on YouTube look really nice, but I still need some of these tools for my day-to-day tasks, so we're just gonna find a better way to integrate them into this space. And the next goal I had here was to gain back more desk surface space, and this really kind of ties back into goal number 1 with removing clutter, but it also sort of ties into goal number 6, which is making this space easier to clean. Too many things on top of a desk just act as obstructions to being able to wipe down and clean your work surface. And the 7th and final goal is to also focus on what's under the desk. Oftentimes this gets overlooked, but under your desk is where your feet go, and if your feet are constantly bumping into things, it's rather annoying. Plus, right now I also have this absolute mess of cables that I want to deal with, so I want the underside to look really nice. Getting things off the floor will also make it so much easier to clean under the desk.
And so we'll start with the easy pickings, and that's going to be the sim racing wheel and pedals that was sitting on the desk behind me. I just don't have a whole lot of time for that anymore these days. And so I'm going to remove it from my desk, and it will no longer be a permanent fixture on the top or on the bottom.
Now that's not to say that I'm going to completely quit my very promising sim racing career. So we're going to take these things out, and I have a solution where I can still play once in a while, but mostly keep this stuff aside. And that's one of these very inexpensive wheel and pedal stands. I realize I'm not going to be the envy of any serious sim racer out there, but the nice thing is that I can fold these things up and just put them aside.
The other thing taking up space on my floor is my printer. It's oftentimes in the way of my feet, and it makes it really hard to clean under my desk.
I think this is a pretty common problem that a lot of people can relate to, and to solve this, I picked up one of these lack tables from IKEA, and they come in different sizes. They're very inexpensive, and my printer happens to fit on top of this one perfectly. With the printer off the floor, I wanted to get the package of paper off the floor, keep it with the printer, and so I 3D printed this small shelf, and it's meant for A4 size paper. And so I'm going to glue the two halves together, and I'm going to screw them onto the bottom of the lack table. And because my printer is a printer and scanner combination, I need a little more height between the bottom of my desk and the top of the printer, so I'm going to cut down these IKEA lack legs. Now on the inside, they're hollow, and so I've 3D printed some feet to close up those holes, and they just press fit in place. These are just some small changes, but they make a big difference to take an inexpensive table and make it functional for my space.
And the last thing I wanted to get off the floor was my computer. Now, over the years, I've upgraded this computer, but new parts keep getting put in the old, dated looking case. And I want to change that up. I want to put my computer on top of my desk or maybe even mount it to the wall. So this requires a complete refresh.
What I have right now is this Cooler Master case that I've had for about 8 years. It's a mid-tower case and it's generally been fine for me up until recently when I upgraded to this 3080 graphics card, and things are starting to look pretty cramped in there, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that's really not being used anymore, like that optical drive. I'm going to give all of the components a good thorough cleaning with an electric air duster and vacuum cleaner, and then start to very carefully remove everything from the original case. Parts that I'm not going to reuse won't get removed, and now we can take a look at the new case, which is the Core P3 TG Pro from Thermaltake. I've also got 3 new fans as well as some NVMe memory that I'm going to install on the motherboard while I've got this whole thing apart. Building and modifying computers is not something that I do on a regular basis, and definitely not something that I've ever featured on this channel before, but I thought it would be fun to create a montage of sorts for this build. Because this thing will not be hidden under my desk, it's going to be a focal point of my workspace, so I want to spend some time making sure it looks nice. This is my first attempt with a PC build to really try and hide the wires and pay closer attention to the wire management, and this particular case made it really easy for me to do that. Now, the wires aren't going to be completely hidden, but hopefully it's good enough that I won't get totally roasted in the comments section. I used 3D printing in a few places in this build, and the first example here is this adapter for one of my solid state drives because it didn't have the proper mounting holes. And the next place that I used 3D printing was to create these hexagon accent grills where they sit in this open area of the case where you'd normally find a heat exchanger for a water-cooled setup. I printed them in white to match the white powder-coated frame, and they attached to the back of the case using these M3x6 self-tapping screws. After that, I installed 3 of these 120mm deep cool fans, and they feature controllable RGB lights. They were a really affordable option, and I really liked how the white fan blades matched the case. After that, I designed and printed an array of these 3 fan mounts, and they'll mount anything from 120 to 140mm fans. They get assembled with these M3x6 self-tapping screws, and although I could mount more fans, that's not my intent here. This Core P3 TG case is an open frame case, and with this case you only get one bracket to mount your fans, and as you guys saw, I chose to mount mine on the side so it would blow across all of my electronic components. And that means the top of my case is now completely open. And so I'm going to use these parts plus these metal dust grills that you just saw me install, and this is going to cover the top of my case. By closing up the top of the case, I'm hoping that this is going to prevent some of the dust from the room coming in through the top and then settling in on the motherboard, graphics card, and all the parts. Now, if you happen to have one of these cases and you're also into 3D printing, I'll make all of these design files available to you guys for free. Go check out the video description down below where you'll find links to my printables page where you can download those files. And don't forget too that in the video description, that's where I'm going to put links to all of the products that I'm using in this video. And that will even include a lot of the little stuff like those metal fan grills that I just used. The large glass panel on the front of this case was one of its major selling points for me, so it was super satisfying to get that on there. With that front panel on, now I could clip in and screw in this top fan mount, of course without the fans for reasons I just explained. And on the back of the case, we're going to be using more of those M3x6 self-tapping screws to secure that panel in there. The very final thing to do is button up the back panel, and you guys might notice that there's a Visa pattern back there, so you can actually mount this thing to the wall. And before I get to the final product, I just want to quickly also show you guys this magnetic fan grill that you can use. It spans across all 3 fans. I thought it would be a good idea to try and further reduce the amount of dust getting sucked inside the case, but ultimately I decided against using them because of how much it restricted the airflow. In the end, I was so pleased with how this turned out and the massive improvement over what I had started with. I couldn't wait to get it on top of my desk.
The next step was just to strip everything off the top of my desk and perform a very deep clean.
By starting with a clean slate, I'm not going to feel tied to any particular aspect of my previous setup, and now it's also going to give me a chance to install one of these RGB LED light strips. This one here is from Makeover, and it can be integrated with Google Home or Amazon, and I'm going to put the controller underneath of my desk, and it just mounts with some double-sided tape, and then the RGB light strip itself also mounts with adhesive tape that comes on the back of the strip. I'm going to put that along the back edge of my desk. With these LED light strips, you don't want to bend them at a hard 90-degree angle, and so I've created a gentle loop there at the corner of my L-shaped desk to transition it from one edge to the other.
After that, I started adding things back onto my desk, and I was focusing on the computer peripherals. Some of my stuff was getting a little bit dated, and I wanted to spend a little money upgrading that, but of course staying within the budget, so I didn't go too crazy.
The first thing I picked up is this wireless keyboard from JLab, and believe it or not, this is my very first wireless keyboard. And the thing that I really like about it is that you can connect to multiple Bluetooth devices simultaneously. It's a full-size keyboard with a number pad. It looks really nice, and the keys are slim. I know mechanical keyboards are very popular right now, but they're just not for me. The other thing I wanted to change up was my speaker setup. This 5.1 Logitech system I've had for about 15 years now, and there's just too many speakers for my small space. I switched over to these Edifier R1280 near-field bookshelf speakers. I chose these ones because they have multiple input channels including Bluetooth, plus they have a really nice warm wood trim, and the price was right. These are going to be sitting on top of my desk, and rather than having the tweeters firing in the direction of my shoulders, I want to try and tilt them up towards my ears, so I designed these 3D printable wedge stands that go under the speakers, and this should hopefully fix that problem. So once the parts are off the printer, they're pretty easy to assemble if you guys are interested in building a set for yourself. There are two 3D printed parts. One is the stand itself, and I printed that in white, and the second part is the trim piece, which I printed in gray, and you can glue that and snap it into place. On the bottom of the stands, there are little pockets. There's 4 of them, and they'll fit these 1-inch furniture bumpers or furniture pads so that once the speakers are playing, you don't have plastic rattling against the top of the desk. Once I was finished, I started laying things back out on top of the desk, and I shifted my monitors over to the left-hand side. Previously, my one monitor was right in the corner, but my monitors are still on top of the original stands, and I figured I could gain back a little more desk space by using these dual monitor arms that mount to the back edge of the desk. I found this one here in white that matches my desk and my computer case, and it comes with some basic features like cable management clips, as well as some brackets to mount it to the back edge of the desk, or if you have a pass-through like a grommet on the top of your desk, you could also mount it through that hole. It comfortably supports 2 of my mismatched 27-inch Dell monitors. The one on the right-hand side with the larger frame I had purchased used many years ago, but just wasn't in the budget this year to upgrade. Previously, my Blue Snowball microphone that I used to do these voice narrations was also just sitting there on top of my desk with the little tripod mount, and it was always in my way. This is something I use extremely frequently for these videos, so I felt justified on spending some money on one of these microphone stands from Newer. It also comes in white, is very budget friendly, and I mount it to the right side of my monitor behind my speaker. Then I picked up a small inexpensive pop filter from Amazon and 3D printed myself a mount for that.
Previously, almost 100% of that half of my desk had been taken up by that gaming setup. And as I had mentioned earlier, sadly, I just don't have a whole lot of time for that anymore. And so I'd already taken care of the racing wheel and pedals, and the last thing left was the TV, but I wanted to keep it because I wanted to use it as a third monitor for my computer, but I didn't want it sitting on top of the desk anymore.
I went with the obvious solution, and that would be a wall mount for the TV, and this one here was just a simple tilting mount, as I figured all I would need to do is just sort of tilt it down a few degrees to point towards me. I didn't need anything too expensive like one of the ones that would articulate. Installation is pretty straightforward, but just for fun, I 3D printed one of these wall drill guides, and how it works is you just place it up against the wall. It has a number of inserts meant for different pilot drill holes, and so then you can just make sure that the pilot hole for your wall anchor goes in nice and straight. I decided not to fish the wires behind the drywall for this installation in case I choose to move the TV in the near future. Instead, I had considered using one of these wall-mounted cable concealers, but I was also concerned if I changed my mind, then it would peel the paint off the wall, so I ended up going with a white cable sleeve instead. They're flexible, super easy to install, and if you have a white wall like me, it just takes away the contrast of the black wires against the white wall. Obviously, it's not completely invisible, but it does a reasonable job of helping those wires blend into the white wall.
Now that I had most of the wired devices in place on top of my desk, I could sort out the wiring underneath.
There are a lot of different under-desk wire management options out there, and after having done some research, I settled on these wire trays from IKEA. If you don't have an IKEA near you, not to worry, I'll put links to very similar ones in the video description down below. These wire trays mount to the bottom of your desk with a few screws. I ended up going with 3 of these trays in total. At some point, I'll go back and spend some time bundling up the wires a little nicer in there, but they did a great job of getting the wires and the power bars off of the ground. And speaking of power bars, I reused most of what I had, but I did need one additional one, and I found this one on Amazon that has outlets on 3 sides, plus has some USB outlets, including USB-C. When your power bar is now barely visible under your desk, it makes finding an available port super easy. For wires that I did manage to bundle up, I used these Velcro tie straps that you can cut to length, and they come in a variety of colors. You can get a whole bag of them for about 10 bucks. And also under the desk, you may have noticed that I mounted my Xbox. I 3D printed more of these under desk mounts for the Xbox for those few and far between times where I do get the opportunity to play. It's still easy to access, it remains plugged in, but it's completely out of sight and out of the way, not taking up any space on the top of my desk. If I need to remove the Xbox for some reason, I can just lift it a few millimeters over the retaining lip and pull it out.
One of my original goals was to reduce the amount of clutter on top of my desk and consequently increase the amount of available desk space. Now to do that, that meant getting rid of a lot of the accessories that I'm not frequently using, but I did want to keep the ones that I'm constantly reaching for.
I've got this Western Digital hard drive along with this TP-Link 7-port USB hub that I'd like to keep on top of my desk, so I designed a 3D printable stand to stand them up vertically in order to save space. And alternatively, if I wanted to put them horizontal, I could just mirror that same part, turn them 90 degrees on their side, and you could still put it on top of the desk that way. I'm going to go vertical just to save space, and I know it's unlikely you probably have these exact same 2 units as me, but if you do, link in the video description to these 3D printable files. My old setup also had a large power bar sitting on top of my desk, and it was convenient to use this to plug in things like the charging adapter for my camera and various other devices, but it was way too messy, so I switched over to a smaller power bar that I had laying around, designed a holder for it, so now that it's sitting on top of my desk, and I still have easy access to a bunch of outlets and powered USB ports. And finally, I allowed myself one item that was non-functional, call it flair or a novelty item, to sit on top of my desk. In a previous video, I designed and constructed this smart RGB lamp that could be controlled through Google Home, and it's made from an empty 3D printing filament spool. It's just a fun item that adds a little more color and light to my space.
Lastly, I decided that my lower back was worth investing in. I spent an unhealthy amount of time sitting here working at this desk, and the free chair that I had been sitting in for years had finally run its course.
Good quality office chairs are not cheap, and even my entire budget wouldn't have covered this office chair here had I bought it new. If you're willing to do a little bit of digging on your local buy and sell, oftentimes you can find these great quality chairs that are still in perfect condition for a fantastic price. Some brands like Steelcase seem to be in high demand and may retain their value better than others, but this Haworth chair is incredibly comfortable, and compared to the generic office chairs that I've sat in at Staples in the same price range because they're new, this thing blows away those chairs. If you've never sat in a decent office chair before, you'd be shocked at how different it feels and how much it improves your posture as well as your comfort when you're sitting there for 8+ hours a day. And so the main takeaway here is if you're looking for a really good chair on a budget, consider buying used. One final thing that I did to personalize my space was to add some art. The beautiful thing about art is that it is extremely subjective and personal, and you can save a lot of money by doing it yourself. Some acrylic paint and a canvas is a great way to add some color to your space and break up some otherwise lifeless white walls. In the end, I'm really happy with the way it all turned out, and most importantly, I was able to stick to my budget. There are much fancier workspace builds out there on YouTube, but hopefully you'll find some element of what I've done here interesting or inspiring. Remember to visit the video description down below where you'll find links to just about everything in this video. Thanks for watching.